So this is the third session I've been involved in this morning, and there's only been 3 sessions rounds. So I'm coming one after another, but then I gotta leave for Mexico right after this. So I'm glad you guys are here, though. This was a topic that the group of us, I'm Marty Weatherall, that's Eli Krumholtz, that's Troy Strand. We're very interested in what's happening in the world of crowdfunding, in part because we're launching a new crowdfunding platform. But it's an interesting time to be launching a new crowdfunding platform because of where we are, or where we might think we are on the crowdfunding hype cycle. So the hype cycle is a standard sort of a chart that you can apply new technologies to. But crowdfunding was really exciting in the early days of the platforms that we're about to talk about. But there's been a bit of a backlash. And there are people in this room that have run crowdfunding campaigns. And I really wanted to turn this into a conversation because I'm curious to know what everyone's sort of temperature is on crowdfunding, where we might be. I think we're probably somewhere in that downslope, but maybe we decide at the end where we are. But what's interesting about the hype cycle is it's tied to Amara's law, which is we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. So we might be sort of falling from the initial peak of excitement, but there are things that I believe are here to stay. The ability to validate an idea before you commit fully to producing that idea, or putting all the effort that it takes to bring that idea to life. The use of the internet that connects all of us to raise money for interesting things. These things aren't going away, but we have to kind of figure out how we're going to maximize the potential of that. Again, here's the 3 of us and our Twitter handles if you want to tweet about who's talking. So here's a little slide. It's interesting. Not everyone knows that Indiegogo actually launched before Kickstarter, but it's true. This is just a little simple timeline of, I would say, maybe the most well-known platforms out there. Anybody disagree? Are there any other platforms? I mean, I know there's sort of industry-specific platforms. There's even a kind of a project platform called LaunchGood for Muslim projects or people involved with Muslim things. So, but of all the platforms, these tend to be the most well-known, with Kickstarter kind of above all. Indiegogo actually launched at Sundance, and it was launching around having to raise funds for independent film projects. So that's how they started. And Kickstarter, if you ask most people at Kickstarter, they would tell you that they really like the arts projects. In fact, they were called the People's NEA by the New York Times early on. And it was only as the masses got a hold of it that it started to get turned into sort of a startup launching kind of platform. And Gofundme is actually showing up a lot more. More and more people tend to be using that to fund just sort of lifestyle things. And they're not incentive-based. They're not rewards-based, which is the category of Indiegogo and Kickstarter. But they're set up to enable donations to personal causes and life events, and we'll talk a little bit more about them. But these are all 9, 8, 7 years old now, and I would say that where it turned away from the arts, for Kickstarter and Indiegogo in a big way, there were many great projects that happened here locally, including Smart Things, but. Pebble was that record-setting campaign that raised $10 million back in, they launched April 10th, 2012. And it was the smartwatch before the Apple Watch and all these other things. And it was the record holder for a long time. So this is 2012, raised $10.2 million. I work for an ad agency in town called Fallon, and saw all these amazing projects coming out of Kickstarter and realizing that they need videos and they need marketing help, and that's what we do, and what if we hooked up with them? So I ran a little experiment with the restaurant Travail in Robbinsdale. Has anyone been to Travail? Highly recommend it. Yes? You would agree? Yeah, it's really good. So Travail was kickstarting the opening of its new space, and me and a couple guys from Fallon helped with that. They crushed their $75,000 goal in like 6 hours, and the press was all over it, and they were written up all over the place. And that was another interesting thing about crowdfunding. It was like you put this thing up on a Kickstarter, and reporters want to write about it, right? Like it became a way to certainly not just a platform for raising money, but a way to generate awareness. And there was all this interest around it. And so Travail were the darlings. They raised more money than any restaurant project had at that point. They had really cool rewards like cooking classes and getting out of line at a place that didn't have reservations at the time. So off the strength of that, my agency actually created a program called Fallon Starter Kit, and we got written up in Fast Company. So even people that wanted to help crowdfunding projects were getting press, right? And it was, what does it say there? It was bound to happen. As the size of crowdfunding projects continues to expand, so does the need for aspiring Kickstarters to market themselves more effectively. So here we come into the world. We make Super Bowl commercials. We're also going to make your crowdfunding video and your crowdfunding campaign. And we were just going to offer that up as we did with a form and act like investors. Where were we going to invest our services? We weren't going to charge up front. We were going to take a percentage of the crowdfunding raise. So why not apply for Fallon Starter Kit? You might get a chance to work with this agency that does big ads. So a lot of excitement, a lot of hoopla. Pebble was the record-setting campaign for a while until July and August of 2014 when the coolest cooler, this crazy cooler that you could plug your devices into that had a light inside, had an ice crusher inside. I'm sure we've all heard of it. Who hasn't heard of the coolest cooler in this room? Okay. Well, it was pretty cool, right? It had all this like cool stuff. And they raised $13.2 million. They beat Pebble by $3 million. And everybody wanted this amazing cooler. It launched in August, and everybody at that point said, you don't want to launch in August. Like, people are out at their cabins. No one's on the internet, supporting things. But no, the summertime coolest cooler, like, went nuts in August. Then some really interesting things started popping up. Anybody heard of Gustin, the jeans company? Who's heard of Gustin before? So they started with a Kickstarter campaign, and then they launched their site. It's basically a e-commerce site for jeans, and then it expanded into other things. But notice, that's their shopping page. So you don't buy anything that's available right now. They run these little micro crowdfunding campaigns, pre-order campaigns, and if they reach a goal of orders over a certain amount of time, they'll order exactly how much material they need to make exactly the orders they want, the sizes they know they need, and there's zero waste. So they've drastically reduced waste, and the prices for like selvage denim and stuff that would normally cost a ton fall way down. So that's really interesting, and that's sort of, I think, a highly evolved use of what we're talking about, this functionality done at scale. Gustin's Kickstarter was, I think, 12 or 13, and the site's been up for years now. And they're doing it this way. This is their whole model. So still interesting. Well, not to be outdone, Pebble came out in February of 2015 with their second Kickstarter campaign, and they crushed the coolest cooler. And they raised, what do I got here? They raised $20.3 million on Kickstarter, all right, with a new round of watches. And they were the record holders again. And then, not too long later, in June of 2015, the laws started changing to not just have rewards-based crowdfunding so you can pre-order a watch or you can get front row tickets at the show that you're helping enable, but you can actually, non-accredited investors, all of a sudden, we're going to be able to crowdfund projects for equity. So I think in large part to the popularity of the Kickstarters and the Indiegogos, they thought, well, why can't this be done for equity, not just rewards and digital pats on the back and things like that you can get on Kickstarter. So that rule changed in June of 2015. So we're coming up on 2 years. And then Pebble came out with their third Kickstarter campaign. This was, I don't have the date, but it was in 2016, this just past year. And they didn't beat their record of 20 million, but they raised another 12.7. And I should mention before moving away from equity crowdfunding that we have rules right here in Minnesota. A new law called Minvest, or a new program called Minvest. So you can crowdfund for equity at the national level with federal rules, but you can also do it at the Minnesota level. And Allie is here from MinStarter, which is a platform built upon Minvest. So basically a Kickstarter for Minvest, a platform you can use to run that. So that equity crowdfunding thing is really happening. And Pebble had a third successful campaign, not for equity, but another pre-order campaign. And so everything was looking pretty rosy. The problem was a lot of projects were failing to deliver on their promises. Even Pebble, that had successfully delivered a bunch of watches, ended up selling earlier this year to Fitbit, and the reported acquisition price was $23 million. So they had raised $15 million in venture money on top of the over $40 million in money raised on Kickstarter, and they sold for $23 million. And I'm not an expert on all this sort of like what that means to the investors and everybody else, but it was really a disappointing outcome. So you start to see like even the greatest success story of all time on Kickstarter had an exit that didn't seem ideal. And then of course, if you know about the Coolest Cooler, you know that they only shipped a few of the coolers that they owed, and then they had to start trying to sell pre-orders again because they'd run out of money. And Oregon, where the project was based, is investigating them now. And this is just one example of many projects that, some of which I've been involved in, that have not been able to honor their promises. So this is where you start to see comments in feeds on these pages that say, I'm never going to back another Kickstarter campaign. Why would I do that when I can just wait until it's in the store? Maybe I can get a better deal, but I'm tired of putting my money toward things that never come to fruition. How many people here have had a Kickstarter project that they backed not deliver their reward? Okay. So it's not uncommon. And then one other quick example, back to GoFundMe. This happened recently. So GoFundMe campaigns are used for all manner of things, raising funds for health issues. They have a tuition program where you can fund tuition to your school. But this woman in the UK really wanted to bring her kids to Disneyland or Disney World, and she didn't have the money, and so she decided to put up a GoFundMe campaign to see if she can get her kids to Disney World, because she works a lot and she doesn't have the time to do it. And there was all this backlash, right? So you have press coming out about projects getting investigated, and press coming out backlashing against people using GoFundMe in the wrong way. I mean, what's the right and the wrong way? Like what have we set up here? I gave a talk at Minibar a few years ago about, was it okay for celebrities to use Kickstarter? Is it okay for Spike Lee to use Kickstarter to fund his film? And I was arguing, hey, as long as he's giving cool rewards, as long as he's giving you old, She's Gotta Have It posters signed from his attic, it doesn't matter if he's a celebrity and should be able to, finance his own film or not. You're getting a cool thing in exchange for funding the film. But there's all these police out there that think, hey, crowdfunding should be for this and not for this. And this example from recent days is a good example. And then here's a headline that is just a week old. The Sobro is a coffee table fridge hybrid. And of course, it's crowdfunded, right? So now we've kind of gotten to a world where there's certain things that people are just like, well, that's got to be crowdfunded, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing that's got to be crowdfunded. And then the opening of that article says, remember the Coolest Cooler, the $13 million Kickstarter project that promised a portable cooler with built-in speaker and charging that turned into one of the biggest crowdfunded disasters of all time? Good, hold that thought. So this article, you're like, cool, I'm getting an article about my cool project. And they're comparing it with a legendary disaster. And So even the press now, I've heard many people anecdotally. There's an amazing hardware accelerator called Hacks. Samir is here, went through the Hacks program. Virtually all hardware startups that go through Hacks have a Kickstarter event. It just makes sense to do a pre-order campaign. But they're having a harder and harder time getting press attention because the press has been burned. They've written about what seems like a really cool project, only to have to write about it months and years later when it failed to live up to expectations. But even with this kind of press, the people behind Sobro actually made the pancake printer. You could print. It's like a 3D printer, but with pancake batter, and you can do funny design pancakes. So they've been successful in the past, and I think people trust them. I think that's an important element of this. But they're doing well. They've already raised $400,000. This is live right now. They had a $50,000 goal, and Indiegogo, which is what they're on now, even has a little pop-up that says, "This campaign has a working version of their physical product that successfully performs core functions." You know, Kickstarter used to require that you have a working prototype in your video if you were going to claim this, and then they kind of got a little bit more relaxed. And Indiegogo never had any criteria, but now when they can, they're saying, "Hey, by the way, these guys have a working prototype," and they're trying to instill that trust. So what's happening with the trust? What's happening with the media's attention around Kickstarter? We're just beginning to see in this country what's happening in the equity crowdfunding space. What kind of projects are good for equity crowdfunding? And I'm going to stop talking here in a minute and just turn this open to a conversation. But I will say that Eli and Troy and I are launching a crowdfunding platform right now called Raisable.co. And who knows, we might be on the downward slide of the hype curve, but eventually that's going to level out and find where it wants to be and increasingly optimize and get better. And so what's interesting about Raisable is it makes it super fast and easy to create a crowdfunding campaign. This was my daughter's campaign. We're focusing on students right now. This project was actually born out of Twin Cities Startup Weekend EDU a year ago to make crowdfunding easier for students that want to raise money for cool projects. Donors Choose is there for teachers, and it has been for a long time, but there's nothing that teaches a student who's never done crowdfunding before to how to do it. And so super simple campaign pages, cell phone videos, and the campaign page is actually created in an interaction with a messenger bot a chatbot on Facebook Messenger. So you actually go to our messenger bot with Raisable, and as you can see, this was sort of the coaching that our bot Max was doing to create that same campaign that was on the previous screen. The bot asks you, what's your project about? What's interesting about it? Okay, now shoot a few videos explaining it. Cuts all the videos together, and you end up with a page like this with a contribute button. So after having been at the agency level and doing these deep dives to do all this original work, expensive work to get a crowdfunding campaign up, most people would tell you that you need about a $10,000 budget at least to run a reasonably financed Kickstarter campaign once you pay for the video production and once you pay for all the promotion on Facebook and elsewhere, and once you hire a PR person to try to get whatever PR you can get. Ton of work. So with Raisable, we wanted to see, well, how extremely can you make that, low cost, low burden, yet still effective? And that's our experiment, and we're curious to know how people might use it. And then one other quick mention here, Steve Welvang, who put on Startup Weekend EDU, who's an amazing evangelist and supporter of edtech startups in town, sent us this. This is just in tech.mn a few days ago, but there's a campaign right now. It looks Machina M2. Anybody know these guys or affiliated with these guys? They're on Kickstarter right now. They've crushed their goal. I think it's sort of like it's some hardware that you can put in your car, and then you can tinker with your car and make your car smart. Not unlike Spark, which was a successful Kickstarter project out of Minnesota years ago that became Particle. They were sort of a little chip that you could put into anything and make it an internet-connected thing. I think they're doing something similar for cars. So, Kickstarter's not going away. People are still using it. They're still getting written about when they're successful. But where are we on this hype cycle, and what is working, what's not working, and what do we need? is what I'm curious to open up to this group. Did anything I say provoke any questions or thoughts that anyone wants to share? Yeah.
So you listed unsuccessful and successful Kickstarter, but they always have like a buy-in price and an eventual sale price. How close do people actually come to those numbers?
So the reward price compared to what you could eventually get those items for. If I go back quickly, one thing about this campaign, this Sobro, so that reward price, the early bird was $600, and they're saying that their retail price is going to be like $1,500. So that's as extreme as I've seen it, but normally it certainly makes sense if you're running a crowdfunding campaign to offer a lower price to people that are kind of taking making a gamble on you, taking a chance on you. This is an extreme. It all depends on the economics of the project, obviously, if what you can set your reward price on and still feel confident that you can fulfill, because projects that raise millions of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars and don't fulfill, they get a lot of heat, as you can imagine, right? And so you want to have economics that set up for yourself. But
so the coolest cooler, what was its ratio between those two?
It's a good question. I don't recall it offhand. I'd have to dig it up. But does anyone remember how much the deal was? I know they ended up selling on Amazon after their campaign was closed, and that sale price was 200 something, I think, and I think you could get in a little bit less than that if you got in with Kickstarter, but so many people did and they haven't gotten their coolers yet. I know we have people here that have run campaigns. I'd be curious to know where you ran them and what your experience was, and would you run them again? Anybody want to share anything like that or have any other questions about the state of this, or are there people here that are considering running a crowdfunding campaign? Yeah.
So I have an application that I've recently built, and I'm planning on making this application accessible at no cost to the user. So maintaining, the database, the hosting costs, all of those things, in the best case scenario, if this application takes off and millions of people start using it, that cost exponentially increases. How would you recommend I go about setting my goal for my Kickstarter campaign to adjust, because if 5 people use it, that's something that the goal doesn't have to be very high to help me cover those costs.
Sure.
I kind of need it to be somewhat flexible, or, how would you recommend going about setting that initial goal?
That's a good question. I will say that generally a free software offering, like it sounds like you're building, is tricky to run a rewards-based crowdfunding for.
I was planning on using Gofundme.
I see, okay. So with Gofundme, then you don't have to worry about rewards, right? You're essentially rallying support from people that you know and that people that would find out about this and want this in the world, right? I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Gofundme, you can set a goal, but there's no end date, I believe.
I think so, and I think if you set, you don't have to reach the goal to actually get the funds.
Yes.
You get the funds as they come in.
Indiegogo called that flexible funding versus fixed funding and offered both. Indiegogo, by the way, also offers equity crowdfunding options now too, which is new news I wanted to mention. I think there's general advice for software startups that are trying to start up in a lean way, MVP advice, things like that, that I think would be beneficial. If you're at a point where you absolutely need money, I think you should just project out kind of a forecast. If you exceed the expectations of the forecast and you can't keep up, then that's a thing you would talk to investors about. And I would think equity crowdfunding could be another interesting route for you, either at that stage or Allie could maybe discuss with you a little bit. I think things where rewards aren't quite as natural, but you've got an idea that's really amazing and that people would want to get in on, I think, and it's consumer facing. I think equity crowdfunding seems to me to be a good area to explore for that. Does that help?
Yeah.
So on that note, let's say you were going to do an equity crowdfunding raise, you were going to use Midwest here in Minnesota. What's the profile of the company that's going to do well with that? And what type of company should probably not take that approach?
Allie, would you be so kind as to field that question?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the same companies that you might find on Indiegogo or Kickstarter for a rewards-based company are going to do well because they're able to tell the story as well. They have a social impact. But the ones that are not going to do well, particularly for here in Minnesota, are the ones that have an immediate need for a global or a national market because we're focused on interesting crowdfunding here in Minnesota businesses and Minnesota investors. So focusing on that local aspect is going to play better in the market. It's a new market here too. We're just starting to see not only portal operators come to be approved by the Minnesota Department of Commerce, but also people just getting ready to set up their campaigns. So we're going to just have to see what does play well here in the market.
So consumer facing, where you need to offer it in Minnesota.
Correct.
But there are national equity crowdfunding options. You could do it through on the federal rules. Is that the right?
There are, yeah. If you a popular portal or a popular platform for federal is called Circle Up, and they have some pretty good process that you can look into if you're considering equity crowdfunding at the federal level. But the federal level equity crowdfunding campaigns are regulated by the SEC, so you have a little bit more regulation hoops to go through, and it's a little bit more costly to run those types of campaigns versus here in Minnesota where it's actually an exemption from the SEC rules, so a little less costly, but you just have to weigh your benefits. So definitely check out your options and weigh your considerations based on your growth goals.
What's the web address for the Minnesota?
mnstarter.com.
So one thing that comes up with any crowdfunding campaign, a competitively produced campaign for Kickstarter, Indiegogo, but certainly in the equity space where there are regulations to contend with and to abide by, and I know Allie's team is helping a lot of projects right now get set up for equity crowdfunding, but there are costs involved. One of the things that we're kind of curious about with Raisable, we're just sort of like wondering who might want to use a super easy, low-cost, coached, kind of crowdfunding platform that makes a video for you with your phone. Could that be a pre-funding platform to get friends and family money to help with a more full-up campaign, like on Minstarter or on Kickstarter, or we're focusing on students right now with Raisable. And Gofundme is there, and that's also super easy to just throw a picture up and write a few paragraphs and see if you can explain what you're doing. What we're attempting to do with Raisable and with our chatbot is to actually coach you through that experience and actually give you a video without any video production costs. And so we're kind of wondering, where do we fit, and could it be a pre-funding crowdfunding thing? Because as you ask about equity crowdfunding, there's costs before you can actually start raising. Jake.
Yeah, I'd be curious about your platform and as far as the chatbot goes. I understand that correspondence with your audience is exhausting. Does the chatbot help fulfill any of that need?
I think what Jake's asking is, once you have a crowdfunding campaign up and you start to attract backers, those backers have questions, they have comments, there's a community that grows. That's one of the great attributes of crowdfunding, is you're launching in a very public way, you're raising money, you're marketing at the same time, and you're growing a community. So these are all attributes that got us very excited when we started Fallon Starter Kit. Yes, there is a big job at hand. I know that Smart Things once told me, the guys there told me they had at least 3 full-time people just managing all the comments coming in on their Kickstarter. This was back in like 2012.
Who was it?
Smart Things. They were eventually bought by Samsung, a connected living platform. But Raisable currently is focused on guiding you through the campaign creation process and then sticking with you while your campaign is live to guide you on tips and tricks and best practices to keep promoting. But we're so new that I'm going to take that feedback and we can add that to our roadmap as you get more backers. One thing we have talked about is the backers of a Raisable campaign can subscribe for updates, but instead of getting emails, they can be messaged via Messenger. And we could certainly organize a way for the campaign creators to be fielding comments and see how much our artificially intelligent chatbot could be able to kind of shoulder some of that. It's early days for that, but that's an interesting thought. Oh, yep.
So first, a quick comment. So my daughter did a wonderful video for Girl Scouts, right? So buy cookies to donate to the vets. And I swear Facebook now has, if you say Girl Scout cookies and buy, it doesn't get any distribution. And so how your tool helps those small scale folks actually get it out to people, and it isn't good enough just to put it on your Facebook wall. You have to do something more than that, or tips along the way, because you just don't know. You're like, well, why? How come we hardly got? We got a few likes, but why wasn't it distributed? And I think it's not easy.
That's interesting. By using Facebook Messenger to create a campaign, we make it really easy to message all your friends through Messenger with the campaign, because we're in Facebook, so that's natural. One of the things that that Max coaches you to do when your campaign is live is to fire up a Facebook Live event, almost like a telethon type event. So there's all these kind of new things and new ways to use social that if you've never heard of them before, or you didn't attend this session and I talked about it, we're creating an assistant that will help you do all those things. And I wouldn't be surprised if Facebook was trying to curtail some promotional behavior or make it harder for people to see. But Messenger is sort of new frontier, and going through messengers.
Might try to partner with the Girl Scouts next
Well,
yeah.
If they give us cookies, that'd be great, yeah.
We'll take payment and cookies. But one thing we are doing, so Troy teaches Adventure Academy, which is an amazing charter school focused on entrepreneurship. It's actually where the original idea for this came during Startup Weekend. A group of kids at Venture Academy are doing DNA tests. It's a unit where they're going to research their own DNA test results. And those tests cost like over $100 to get done. So each kid in the class is doing a Raisable campaign to fund the purchase of the DNA kit. I think the goal is like $130 when it comes to shipping and everything. So you get, handful of people to donate $20 or $23 is what we're saying they should do, right? Because it's like $1 for each pair of chromosomes. But each kid has a phone. They can create a campaign. But we can group them together, and so all the funds pool in one account. So when you lower the barrier to threshold, the barrier to getting a crowdfunding campaign up to basically zero, and anybody with a phone can do it and do it in a compelling, personal way with an honest video, not a flashy video, but an honest video. Eli was sort of the guy who first sort of pointed us in this direction. It's like, what about group campaigns? You could actually have a group campaign made up of individual campaigns, each appealing to that person's friends and family, and the Girl Scouts would be an amazing use case for that. So, love to talk more.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh.
So my visibility with Kickstarter is to look at one of the gadget magazines online. So how do you move from just posting something on Kickstarter to getting notification and interest in whoever's publishing these gadget sites?
So one thing I'll mention, how many people here visit Product Hunt? Familiar with Product Hunt? So Product Hunt is just a couple years old, but it's a daily posting site where new products that are launching get posted to Product Hunt, and you can upvote them. And every day there's an email digest. The top 10 vote getters are in the digest, and they get a ton of awareness off that. I mention it because for a long time, Product Hunt didn't want to ever allow crowdfunded products to be posted there. And then they started just giving in. And so now when you're on Product Hunt, you don't know if it's something you can buy right now or if it's something that's in a crowdfunding event. And you have to kind of dig a layer deeper and see. But there are tools like Product Hunt, to answer your question, that are effective for certain types of things. You really have to think about who your target backer audience is. And Facebook has some incredible targeting tools. I would say Facebook is probably the first thing to consider. You have to pay money to promote through Facebook, but the ROI typically is good if you're targeting well and you have something that people like when they see. I think networking as much as possible in the real world. If you can run a campaign during a time where there's a convention happening around your idea and you can go to that convention, or you can somehow remotely network with people around that space. I mean, it truly gets into the growth hacking space. I've often said, you know, you look at a crowdfunding campaign that you're contemplating doing, and you've got two big things to consider: the content and the promotion. You got to have a good campaign where you're telling your story in an effective way, and it looks as professional as it needs to look, you know, based on what you're doing. But that's just half of it. That's what Fallon's Starter Kit was ideal for. But the other side is pure hustle and growth hacking and leveraging tools like Facebook ads and things like that, and getting the most bang for your buck, because when that campaign is live, you're on 24/7 trying to figure out who is out there that would want to help this, would want to back this that I haven't gotten to yet, you know, and it's just this constant pressure. That's, I would say, researching like the latest tips and tricks in the world of growth hacking, and think about Facebook certainly for targeting, and then Product Hunt for certain projects. Yes.
So I want to talk about real estate crowdfunding. Does anyone have any experience in this room on fundraise or CrowdStreet or realty shares?
Any-
So how
I
do
do. Well, with CrowdStreet specific, I invest with them, so I've got some experience with that, but it's a long conversation.
Yeah, we can talk offline. But my question is, are there SEC guidelines? I know you talked about some
Yes.
guidelines for these crowdfunding.
Yes, you have to be a secretary as an investor, you have to have a CPA that proves that to you, or a lawyer, and you apply, and then the investor will look up your papers, your passport, and will decide to take the investment formula. It's the same as 50 grand.
Yeah.
It has to go through some of the regulations.
Yeah, that's maybe it's not offline, but my bigger question is, there are so many that are popping up in this space, and there doesn't seem to be any, there is a bubble waiting to happen on these kind of things. And it's just not about real estate. There are so many like Gofundme, and we don't know, there is no accountability, so who is this going to be the monitoring agency? So
That's really interesting. I hope you guys can network afterward, but
I got that answer too. For those
Go ahead.
specific, like CrowdStreet, it's the securities, so you're regulated based on the state you're investing in. So for mine would be Texas, so any problems would be in Texas. It's regulated, but in general, who regulates all the investments? There's not really an answer for that. It really depends on what you're looking for, how much you're investing. You really have to protect yourself as the lawyers, make sure you have a proper paperwork and term sheet and all that cool stuff. So.
it sounds like it's early days. And again, though, this
It really is, yeah.
the power of the web to network us and to allow us to find opportunities and to help projects happen, that's not going away, right? But how are we going to settle in and make this so you don't have all the fraud accusations happening on Kickstarter, and you don't have, you know, projects that are doubtful, you know, to get involved in. Mark,
It's related to this topic, I just wanted to understand is what the scenario is. Is it the scenario that you're trying to sell a piece of real estate and you're using the crowdfunding approach for that?
That's what these companies are promising. So initially, as he said, you have to be an accredited investor, so that you have to go through a certain process to get there. Like you have to have at least 50K for investments. Now there are websites where you can throw in $500 and you can be part of these investments. And what is that?
That's, those are the robo-advisors that you're talking
Yeah,
about? Like
yeah.
Betterment, Wall
Yeah, but
Street?
Betterment is different, but on the real estate side, so
On
you
real
could be like one of the 50,000 people to fund this real estate in somewhere in the middle of Arkansas. I have no clue whether it really exists or is somebody scamming this, and there are a lot of scammers that
It
already.
doesn't
in the
exist,
space.
it's all blueprints.
Yes.
Mostly they come in.
Yeah, so they work with some third-party companies, so there's no regulation around it, is how I look at it.
So we're down to 5 minutes left. I want to make sure that everybody's getting what they wanted to out of this. It's such a huge topic, and I could go on and on about, you know, what to do if you're running a Kickstarter campaign, but there's all these new types of crowdfunding and all these new verticals. So anybody else really have something, a question?
Well, I'd like to.
Yes.
I'd like to be a guinea pig. So I bootstrapped, I'm not a coder, but I bootstrapped an app called One Radio News. Almost 100,000 downloads on Google Play. It's Android based. I've invested $10K of my own money on iOS, and it's been a sordid tale to get on iOS. But on Android, I have a paid version where I've got over 2,000 people who bought it. But I'm thinking about, in order to bump that up and to basically get to the next level, I need those users to go from having paid once for $3, give me $1 a month, but I also need them to invest in the improvements because I'm tapped out, if you will, right?
Right.
You know, so I'm in this phase where I'm not going to spend $10,000 to raise $10,000. I want to raise $5,000, $10,000. But it is for, it's for a product, and I have those existing users. But how do you sort of convert them and get them inspired to go from I already paid you $3 to hey, I want to put in 20 or 50, and then feel good about maybe they'll get their bonus as they get the free subscription for life. But any thoughts on how to go 5 to 10?
Did everybody hear Steven's question? He's got an app. He needs some more funds to sort of take it to the next level. He's got existing subscribers and existing users. Impressive numbers so far. I would say this was true in the case of Travail. The restaurant had tons of superfans who were desperately waiting for them to reopen. Anytime you have an existing database of engaged people that love what you're doing, I think those are activatable people. A lot of projects are coming out of the garage with no network, and you have to kind of create that from scratch. If you've got an existing network, and then you have urgency, right? One of the great natural attributes of a Kickstarter campaign is that there is an end date, and you have to decide. You're like, okay, am I going to be in or not? Am I going to miss this boat and wait? In your case, the urgency could be, I don't know if I can keep.
Me go get a job.
Yeah, right. I don't know if I can continue supporting this app unless I'm successful with this funding round. And if you can come up with some sort of incentive that is, low cost but meaningful to fulfill, like a personal conversation with you, or I don't know what it might be, but whatever would be appealing to the group of people that have grown to like your app. And then also leverage them to help promote it to others, because if they want it and there's an urgency because it might go away, they could each tell 5, 10 friends to say, hey, please help with this, because otherwise it's going to go away and I really love it. So if you can leverage an existing network, that can be hugely powerful. And it's not in every case is that there, if that helps.
And I'm trying to choose between potential platforms.
Sure.
I look at Gofundme and I think, well, that's just, the impression you get there is it's more, fun my vacation or whatever. And then in Kickstarter, it just looks like the barriers to entry are pretty high, or not. And then, so what's your thought on that?
Well, that's part of what Raisable is interested in seeing if we can be a part of, because it's much lower effort than Kickstarter and lower cost to get in. There's no problem if you don't have a professionally produced video, because everybody's got a cell phone video on our platform. But if you're activating friends and family, we're interested in that being something that, it doesn't have a reputation yet. So there's a reputation issue that we may have to overcome. And I'm curious to know if people think that, what if you showed up on a platform you'd never heard of before, and a friend or someone that you like what they're doing is raising money there? How much of a obstacle would that be, or concern? But I think we've actually kind of been playing with our elevator pitch, and we're now kind of playing with the terms friends and family, because a personal video that's not flashy, that they can activate your friends and family, whether that's friends and family of a student that wants to do a DNA test, or Girl Scouts, or a fan base, right? We're trying to make that as easy and low cost and guided as possible. So we're there as an option. And GoFundMe, we don't have any GoFundMe baggage yet. We don't have any reputation yet, but there's some baggage there. Anything else?
In terms of your hype cycle there, if you were able to plot out the different types, that we've seen, where would this new equity rule kind of be? Do you think it's going to add new life to that scale? Is that your big question?
We can close with that question. I think that's a good question, because the equity crowdfunding topic is always popular. It's always coming up at events like this. Is Mintstarter having a session today or doing anything to talk about equity crowdfunding?
Not today.
Not today.
Have lunch with me.
Have lunch with Allie. I will say that there's some early examples in the U.S. of these projects happening. I'm not well versed in all of them. I hear a lot of entrepreneurs really interested in it. I'm most curious to see where the funders, where are the non-accredited investors who have been left out because they're non-accredited, that are banging on the door like, when can we finally start throwing some money into these things? I'm curious where they're going to come from, and I think that's the real test of that. You know, we've proven that people will, for a digital thank you or for a T-shirt or for, you know, a pre-order of a cool new gadget, they'll come out and support a Kickstarter campaign for that. The entrepreneurs have a whole other question to how to manage an army of investors, you know. So I think it's got the potential to breathe some life into all this. It might have its own related cycle that's sort of offset from this, you know. Excitement, fall, and have to level out. But hopefully this was helpful. You guys can get in touch with us. Oops. Here, founders at raisable.co if you just want to talk more crowdfunding. We're just really curious to know if a tool like we're building fits in the world as it is right now and where we are in the hype cycle. And I appreciate you guys all being here to talk about it.